This episode of the only podcast about movies was recorded off-site. Shahir and I are not in the same room, and therefore you might hear a few audio anomalies you're not used to. But don't worry, I'm just as much of a jackass, and he's just as smug as if we were staring longingly into each other's eyes like usual. With that in mind, enjoy the show. What is up, Internet? Looks like Minnie's Haberdashery is about to get cozy for the next few days. This is the only podcast about movies. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And I'm Shahir Dowd.
And howdy to you, Shahir. This is the only podcast about The Hateful Eight.
Little movie by a little-known filmmaker, Quentin Tarantino? No, Quentin Tarantino.
Thank you.
I'm just playing with you. Yes, little-known, the eighth film by Quentin.
The eighth film by Quentin Tarantino.
Also titled The Hateful Eight. Coincidence?
I didn't even put those two and two together, but that's kind of lovely.
Do you think his ninth film is going to be the
Not Nine Lives? I don't fucking know. I don't know what you're talking about. This movie, I don't know. I just, full disclaimer to everyone at home, it's been a while since I've seen it. I saw a screening with my girlfriend, thank you, darling, and thank you to the PGA, where we actually got to see it about 2.5 weeks ago with Quentin Tarantino in attendance in 70 millimeter, which was very, very nice.
Listen to you.
But I just want to say, if it's a little bit cloudy on my part, I'm leaning on Shahir for the factual knowledge behind this one.
And just, not even a disclaimer, but I saw the film last night in a screening. Much has been talked about. There's a number of things to talk about with The Hateful Eight. Let's try and break it down for one, but just coming off the back that you saw it a couple of weeks ago, I saw it last night. I paid $20 a ticket for my screening because the film was being projected in 70 millimeter. Did you see this in 70 millimeter?
I did. I just said that.
Oh, I apologize. I don't listen.
No, it's fine. It's not like you listen to me anyway.
I don't even listen to a word you're saying. But now, my experience of watching a cinema, and I'm going to call the theater out on this. I saw it at the Village East Cinema in downtown Manhattan, and I am very disappointed by the screening. The screen was incredibly small, which entirely defeats the purpose of being in 70 millimeter and kind of annoys me because I paid such a high premium for the ticket.
No, I would be pissed too.
Yeah, and it was slightly misaligned as well, which in some part added to the charm of the film because it was occasionally flicker and you could see the top of the film gate. But on the other side of it, I was just kind of annoyed by, it's a lot of effort for me to go out to see a movie these days because I've just had a baby, and to pay a premium and to see it in 70 mil. To be honest with you, for me, the 70 mil was a waste of time because of the projection. But
I feel bad for you that you had that experience because when I saw it, holy balls, did it look cool.
Right.
And it's funny because, again, I'm not the most... I have a decent eye when it comes to video quality and acumen and sort of what was shot on what and blah, 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 blah. But this had a distinct look to it. But you're absolutely right. You did need a large screen for it to even matter.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Shahir, can you explain to me and probably the people at home what the difference between 70 millimeter and IMAX is, like true IMAX?
Well, IMAX has a much larger film gate, so IMAX is a much taller format. 70 millimeter for those keeping score at home, and my DOP friends will probably call me out on this, but most traditional film stock is either 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter. 70 millimeter is obviously double the size, which means the actual negative is much bigger, but it was traditionally used to shoot very narrow formats like 2.76 to 1 or 1.8235 to 1. So when I'm talking about that, if you're watching a movie at home, you're watching, say, Lawrence of Arabia, even if you have a widescreen TV, you'll see something that is letterboxed because the 70 millimeter format was really designed to shoot really big widescreen vistas. You could put the camera far away and see really, really far, it really highlights the relationship between the sky and the landscape. IMAX, on the other hand, is a much taller format. So if any of you went to see The Dark Knight Rises or The Dark Knight, for example, in IMAX, in true IMAX, you would have noticed that scenes that were in IMAX filled the top to bottom of the screen. And then when they cut to film a scene that was filmed 35 millimeter, you'd get that letterboxing happening again on the IMAX in your IMAX screen. So IMAX, I think, is even bigger than 70 millimeter. The thing is, 70 millimeter is a fairly rare format, as I'm sure Quentin Tarantino explained to you. It was traditionally used in those westerns, things like Ben-Hur.
Yep.
I believe 2001 might have been filmed in 70 millimeter, but don't quote me on that. Lawrence of Arabia as well. So it was traditionally reserved for those kind of grand epics. And it was a way for studios, much like they're doing with the release of The Hateful Eight, to offer some prestige to the film going exhibition. You know, like you'd go, oh, I'm going to go see something in a format that is unusual. So with that being said, did the 70 millimeter matter to you, and compare that in your mind to you and I are both people that have projectors at home now, to screening HD, to watching 4K, to watching IMAX even.
I'm finding, and this might be personal preference, as I get older, as long as the image is clear and presented in a way that I believe it was meant to be, it presented.
Yeah.
I'm kind of fine with it. I unless you're looking at something fucking huge, like I have an 8-foot screen at home. And you have my old 10-foot screen at home.
This is so incestuous.
Yeah, I know. But especially like 1920 by 1080 is totally fine for me. And sure, if you threw up a 4K image on there, I'd probably be like, oh, wow, that's really clear. But I don't know if I'm getting less video snobby as I get older. I think we have it pretty good with our various formats we can get at home. That having been said, you know, the visual quality of 70 millimeter, like the actual, like, oh my God, the look of it didn't blow me away. But what did blow me away is, you know, as you said, this format has been used in the past to shoot huge, expansive things. This whole movie, 80% of it takes place in one big room, like one medium-sized room, really. So instead of seeing large expanses, you see most of the set and most of the room and tons of detail in that set. And that, to me, was what sort of made it feel more special. It wasn't that, oh, it's bigger and it's clearer. It's that I get to see there's more time and room for my eyes to catch things now. Based on what they did. In
a way, 70 mil is what HD is to standard definition for the movie theater. So if you remember when you went from standard definition to HD at home, and it was kind of like everything was suddenly sharp and crisp and clear.
But it's funny, in this movie, it's not that things are sharper or crisper or clearer, it's just you see more of it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I mean, one thing I noticed when watching it as well is that you could have a character on one side of the room and a character at the complete opposite side of the room, and they would be at the opposite edge of frame, and there was just this huge expanse between them where you could see all the detail between the room. So I thought that was cool, but I was very disappointed by my screening. So if you're in New York, you know, and I like the Village East Cinema. I saw The Master there in 70 mil in one of their bigger auditoriums, and it was fantastic. For some reason, they're playing this in one of their smaller theaters. You could see it was really makeshift. They just laid some.
Are you sure they're not playing it in like both of them?
I mean, I went to a 5:30 screening, and that's what I saw. I paid $20 for my ticket, so it was $40. You know, $40 for tickets for me and my wife to go. So I was very disappointed. On my recommendation, don't go see it at the Village East Cinema. I think the Lincoln Center is playing it in one of their bigger theaters, and it might be a better experience there. That said, this is a filmmaker kind of inside baseball kind of discussion before we even get to the movie. But the you know, right now, Project Greenlight. If anyone's, do you watch Project Greenlight, Matt?
I don't.
Okay, I know it's not not everyone's watching it, but I was particularly compelled by this season of Project Greenlight. For those who don't know, Project Greenlight is a filmmaking show hosted by and created by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, where they try to give a young filmmaker the opportunity to make a feature film. This season became quite popular in the filmmaking community. Every time I met up with filmmakers, we'd all talk about it because for a number of reasons, but one of those reasons was that the filmmaker Jason Mann made a big deal about shooting his film on film instead of shooting it digitally. Now, I've made films on film, and I've made the transition to making films digitally as well. So I've been on both sides of that, and my feeling is put your money in front of the camera, don't put your money in the camera. And that's actually what happened on Project Greenlight. You basically he was offered an additional $300,000 to make the film on film, or he could get an extra 2 days of filming. Matt, if that was you,
no, I'd take the 2 days. I'd fucking take the 2 days. I'm an editor by heart, man. I want options.
Yeah,
and I want as much as the most possible chance to get the perfect take. So
exactly, and it turned out, I haven't seen the film that was made from Project Greenlight. It was called The Leisure Class, but I'm told it wasn't particularly good, and the fact that it was on film was completely lost on 90% of the audience. If
you don't have an infinite pocketbook, you are limiting yourself if you're shooting film, sadly.
This is an interesting discussion to have, because I know Quentin Tarantino is very very aggressively pushing the film button, because he is by all accounts a passionate film
historian.
Yeah, film historian and defender of the film making process. He doesn't like digital. He wants to see films being made on film. But I'm increasingly, and that's again, we love to see our heroes champion. It's kind of like when people are championing vinyl. Yes, film is better, but vinyl is but it's a dying format, and economically it makes very little sense, especially when you've got a budget to try and concede with.
See, so I personally don't think film is better at this point. I think it feels different. I think it depends on if you have infinite money and you're choosing. I think there's still plenty of reasons, depending on the look and the feel of what you're trying to do, and just the topic, if you really want to get down to it, that you could very well choose to do it on video, and that's the right call. Whereas film, I think it's sort of the same deal. It has to do with your topic and the style and the thing you're making.
Absolutely. But I would say there are very few cases now, because you're right, the aesthetic quality of digital is slowly approaching what film could do, just from a pure pixel to film density comparison. Like the Alexa, the Red, these things are getting very, very close to the amount of detail you get in a film negative. But the thing that I think is interesting is that Quentin Tarantino's argument that we should all be shooting film, we should be pushing for film, is true, but it is somewhat economically biased. Quentin Tarantino, I know he was once an independent filmmaker, but now can command a huge budget, can command the roadshow release of his film, can do these sorts of things. That's not really available for a first-time filmmaker. So to make the argument that you should shoot on film is kind of saying you should have as much money as possible for your film, which is not necessarily, and would mean that a lot of films wouldn't get made. I don't think he's. After hearing him speak about sort of the reasons why they did it and all this stuff, I know he's trying to champion film in general and this format in particular for certain things. I don't think he's trying to say that. I think he knows his place, and I think he feels very sort of lucky to be able to do it. I think he's sad that it's not financially feasible for other people to do. Yeah. And I think not so much like championing, like, hey, bring it back. I think he's just like,
oh my God, I can't believe I got to do this. And hopefully people will see this. And maybe it'll help push maybe a couple more people to do it.
Yeah.
Like, and maybe he hopes it'll start like an avalanche of shit. Now, I don't think it's going to.
No, I think it'll only be reserved for the Quentin Tarantinos, the Christopher Nolans, the Paul Thomas Andersons of the world. Maybe not. It might even like for example, I believe Star Wars: The Force Awakens was shot on film, so it'll be reserved for the kinds of filmmakers who are making films that will generate revenue. It won't. I don't think it's economically feasible for more obscure films to be made, and it's a difficult argument as well, because like how many photographs are shot on film these days anymore? Like we all shoot digital now. It's just the trend. Like there's not a lot of vinyl being printed anymore either.
Right.
So it's a dying format. I do love it. Like for me, the love of film comes from being on set when film is rolling. To me, there's something.
Well, there's something about that sound, right?
Yeah, there's something magical about, and it makes you like the thing that I get sad about in the transition from film to digital is that digital. There's almost an infinite amount of takes and an infinite amount of stock. Now, that doesn't mean you have an infinite amount of time, but
time is your limiter.
Time is your limiter. Whereas before, when I was shooting on film, for example, we would only have a limited amount of stock. So like we knew going into certain scenes, it'd be like we have 3 takes of this at best. So we would rehearse the hell out of it and then shoot our best takes. Whereas now I go into it and go, well, I've got digital, I've got like a terabyte of hard drive space, which means I can roll for an hour or two and then clear that hard drive and I've got another hour or two. So I tend to like shoot a little bit longer now.
Sure. I mean, well, look, there's something super rock starry about what Quentin Tarantino's doing and sort of about what film is now. It's like, you got 3 takes, better get it. And you use what you get, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like there is a magic to that. And if you're cool with that, and if you can command enough sort of, control to do that and be fine with the result, then fuck, you're a much stronger filmmaker than I think. And obviously Tarantino is, of course, but but like, I just don't think it's feasible. I think there's lots of other stories that can be told in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, a really good example this year, and there have been a few of these pop up every now and again, but Tangerine, which is the LGBT drama set in downtown LA about a transgender prostitute, which was shot entirely on an iPhone, and the thing.
Did that come? You're saying that was good?
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic film.
So it didn't come off as gimmicky, because I could see that going the other way too.
No, it comes off great because the film has this like kinetic energy about it, and although it's shot like a traditional film, shot reverse shot with scene setups, it doesn't look like someone's holding an iPhone and is a part of the film. It has this frenetic energy about it, and being shot on this format that is so quick and immediate, it actually works for the film really well. Here's the thing that I would say.
They must have lit that thing like a motherfucker.
Well, no, because the iPhone's really good at catching natural light, so you just kind of have to accent it and color correct it to the way you want. It looks great, and it works, like you said before, it works for the story that they're trying to tell. My issue in general is that if you showed, those two aren't good examples, but if you showed the 70mm print of the Hateful Eight to someone and then showed them Mad Max Fury Road, which I believe was shot digital, maybe 5% of the audience might know the difference. 95% of the people aren't really going to know the difference, and they're not going to care. All they care about is the content. So for me, I always come back to that thing, which is that if you can shoot film, great, and if it suits your story, fantastic, do it. It's a beautiful format. But to me, I'm always going to try and put my money in front of the camera.
Agreed.
So that's it's an interesting discussion because of the way that Tarantino is championing film. But that aside, Tarantino himself, where do you, how do you come to, like this, obviously a lot of people are going to see this because it's a Quentin Tarantino film. And I don't know how about you felt about the film itself, but to me, it felt very quintessentially Tarantino.
Oh yeah. 100%.
I mean, how do you feel about Tarantino?
I really like him. Down to the point that in high school we were making comedy versions of Pulp Fiction, me and my friends back in the day, these shitty little VHS tapes that we used to make. Pretended to be Marcellus Wallace or like, whoever.
Which is perfectly normal behavior for 15-year-old boys.
Right. Or like, just anything, Sam Jackson's character doing the speech, the whole nonsense.
And how about later Tarantino after Pulp Fiction?
That's sort of how I got into it. That was sort of like the gateway to it for me. But then I think the movie that really got me sort of into him was, again, I think it kind of followed my adolescence into adulthood quite well, sort of Kill Bill. Yeah. Kill Bill, I mean, the 70s and 80s sort of kung fu movies are probably some of my favorites, and I would love to do a side podcast about just those, because they're
Shaw Brothers.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. There used to be a channel. It was on for a year on cable. It was just like a throwaway channel called Kung Fu HD. And speaking of format conversions and things, they take these beautiful 35 millimeter prints of these movies and just throw them on HD, and you'd see them sort of, because I've only seen them on DVD and VHS like before, because I've never seen them in the theater, and they looked so fucking cool. I loved that channel dearly. I watched it easily 2-3 times a week, just seeing amazing films and amazingly horrible and some kind of legitimately moving. And then the channel went under.
And this is what brought you to Jim Carter at some point, I'm sure.
No, well, because Jim Carter's an American movie.
I know, but it's a kung fu sort of ripoff as well.
The Thrill of Gymnastics and The Kill of Karate. No, that was college. But no, so obviously I share the same love that Quentin Tarantino has for these types of movies, because Kill Bill was an homage to all of those films.
Right.
And even though the second one was a little more Western, and then it sort of just turned, I mean, obviously there was Inglourious Bastards and whatnot, but then it sort of turned all Western all the time for him.
It has, hasn't it, recently?
Yeah, I will be the first to say I don't like Westerns.
Yeah.
I don't like them. There's nothing about them that calls to me. There's nothing. I like if you mix a Western with a different genre, a la Firefly or like Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
But there's something about it that has never grabbed me, and I know it grabs a lot of people. So especially when Django came out, that wasn't quite a Western. That was a little bit. It was like leaning towards that, but I loved Django.
Yeah.
And then this, which again, spoiler alert, I liked it. It didn't. I think Quentin Tarantino has a great way about him when it comes to either period pieces or Westerns in general, because you still get the feeling of his writing. Like they don't speak exactly like someone would in the time. And I think even great films like Tombstone and some other ones, I can't even think of them just because I don't really watch them. But like, I can appreciate them for the quality of film that they are, but just like the drawlness of the speech and just the way people talk is not something that interests me. Even spaghetti westerns. In fact, the only spaghetti western or even like old school western I like is High Noon. I don't know if you ever saw that, Shahir.
The John Ford film?
Yeah. Back in the day, way back.
Yeah.
That I just loved. I loved the concept of the entire thing taking place in real time. That was sort of my my thing. But so yeah, I don't like westerns, but I liked this movie because it felt distinctively Tarantino.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if this is the same for you, but I always feel like westerns is my dad's genre. Like it's the genre that every dad has watched and tries to get their kid to watch. Sure. Maybe from our generation. And yeah, I'm actually with you on that, which is that I'm not a Western buff, like I've seen a few. I remember taking a class about it. I like, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I like Stagecoach. I like Shane, and even the postmodern Westerns, things like Tombstone that you say, and Unforgiven. I like those, but it's just not a genre I'm particularly interested in, because it has a pacing all to itself that I just haven't seen the right Westerns is my problem.
I don't know. Yeah. You can throw Aliens into it and I still won't watch. You can throw Aliens and Jon Favreau at it and I won't see it.
Well, that might have more to do with the film itself, but But Tarantino is, again, is a personal hero. He Pulp Fiction came out, blew my mind. I remember I snuck into a theater to see it. Because it was an R18 film in New Zealand, which means you had to be 18 years old to see it. And I somehow managed to get in, and I was the only one in
Well, you're tall.
Yeah, I was the only one in my school that had seen it. So I was kind of like telling everyone how it worked. And I remember like in one class, I kind of interrupted. I was so taken by this film that I interrupted the entire class's teaching for a day, for an hour, to like explain how the structure of this film worked, where a character died but appeared in the next scene, and how the film kind of folded backwards on itself in time.
Shahir down to the principal's office. Shahir down to the principal's office.
Well, at that point, everyone was so excited by what Pulp Fiction was that even the teacher was kind of like into me talking about it. I remember drawing a diagram on the board, and he was asking me questions about how the film worked as well.
Well.
But
no, that's cool. That's very cool.
Liberal education. What can you say? So I love me some Quentin Tarantino. I think Pulp Fiction is a game changer. I think Reservoir Dogs is a game changer. Mm-hmm. And I love the maturity that happened to Quentin Tarantino. He's a filmmaker who suddenly, he might have been like 28 or 30 when he made Pulp Fiction. And so he's suddenly the poster child for a whole new genre of filmmaking. People are imitating him left and right, trying to make the LA crime drama comedy that he's kind of doing. And no one can do it like he does. There is no one who's like Quentin Tarantino. You could argue maybe the most popular filmmaker that was successful around his time was Paul Thomas Anderson, who made Boogie Nights. But Boogie Nights is nothing like a Quentin Tarantino movie.
No.
His films exist in their own unique universe. So I love the maturity that came with the film, like Jackie Brown. I love the genre bending and the big, the fact that Quentin Tarantino, this talky crime filmmaker, suddenly start making a big blockbuster like Kill Bill and Kill Bill Volume 2 and bringing back that short tradition to it. I think Inglourious Bastards is excellent. To me, Inglourious Bastards is like a fine wine, which is that it deserves appreciation and it is wonderful, but it's not as game-changing to me as Pulp Fiction.
Sure.
I liked Django a lot, but I feel like there started to be this, like you're saying, it's all Western all the time, this kind of sense of familiarity with Quentin Tarantino starting to creep through. And this film feels like the most familiar Quentin Tarantino film. It even to the point where it has the same chapter headers that you saw in Kill Bill. It opens with the 8th film by Quentin Tarantino. It has the same title stylings as Kill Bill.
No.
And
it
Django.
Opens with a overture.
Oh,
my friend, a 2.5-minute overture.
Well, let's get into the roadshow presentation in a second. But yeah, before we get into that, the kind of familiarity, we know we're getting the Tarantino dialogue. We know we're getting the long explanations of process that he's so interested in. We know that time will fold in on itself as it does in this film. So that air of familiarity, while welcome because nobody else does Tarantino like Tarantino, does start to kind of, make you feel a little bit like, hey, what else you got up your sleeve, kind of thing. I don't know if you felt that way.
I didn't this time.
Right.
Only because this movie at its core is kind of a whodunit in a weird way, not something that's been done yet. But as we'll get into in the plot, it's kind of sort of a mystery of sorts as to the motivations of these 8 people stuck in a blizzard in an inn in the West somewhere.
Well, that's interesting. I think I would disagree slightly, but I think we should get into that in spoiler territory a little bit more. We've talked a little bit. We haven't even told you what the film is about. So, the plot synopsis, again from IMDb, in the dead of a Wyoming winter, a bounty hunter and his prisoner find shelter in a cabin currently inhabited by a collection of nefarious characters. with a few Quentin Tarantino regulars, Kurt Russell, who we saw from Death Proof. Actually, we didn't even mention Death Proof when we were going through.
I was going to say the dialogue in this reminds me the most of Death Proof, but that's just me.
I mean, Death Proof to me is the low point for Quentin Tarantino. I do not like that film.
True, but I'm saying this took the quality dialogue that movie, and it didn't have much else other than Kurt Russell in quality dialogue.
Yeah.
That took that and added the rest of a movie in this case.
Right. So, Samuel L. Jackson, we've got Tim Roth is in there, Michael Marsden. I don't know if Bruce Dern has ever been in a Quentin Tarantino movie before.
I don't know.
Zoe Bell, the New Zealand stunt woman who's basically in every Quentin Tarantino movie right now.
Yep.
Puts them all in a room, which again seems to defy the purpose of 70 millimeter if it's not going to be an outdoor expansive movie.
But it don't.
It's this interior chamber piece, kind of like, to me, the film that this actually reminded me of, and I'm sure there are probably, for every Quentin Tarantino movie that comes out, there will be an essay published within a week of all his film references that are, that he's riffing on.
Sure.
I'm sure there's some particular film that he is riffing on directly that that is this chamber piece. But to me, this felt like a Sergio Leone film crossed with Agatha Christie's Clue, which is all these not Agatha Christie's Clue, Murder on the Orient Express, which is
makes more sense.
Yeah, which is all these characters in one space trying to figure out something. Now, but I don't kind of see it as a whodunit per se, as you kind of describe. But that's a general synopsis. Matt, what do you think of the movie?
I mean, I dug it like crazy.
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really good. The only problem I would say with it is I feel like it's not going to be one of his films that upon further viewings will hold the same magic as the first one. And again, whodunit is the wrong word because no one done anything really. They have, but you don't know. It's a whole big thing. It's just sort of a mystery because everyone's paranoid and you're not sure if people are who they say they are in this place. And that's what kept me interested, the suspense that they built. And then they go back, to explain a little bit. And then they go, snap back that time bending shit that you had mentioned.
Yeah.
I loved it. But this movie, and I'm gonna go back to a weird Michael Douglas film, but you remember The Game?
Yeah, I love David Fincher's The Game. I love that movie.
So The Game is a movie that I watched once and instantly knew that I would dislike it the next time I watched it. Or not dislike, but just not care. Like,
you're so wrong. Watch it again.
No, I've done it.
Yeah.
I just don't. It lost all because I know if the spectacle is the mystery, once you've figured out the mystery for me.
Well, we'll get into a side note about The Game just very quickly, but the thing that I love about The Game is that the mystery becomes secondary to the fact that this is a film about a guy wanting to commit suicide, and this is his way to work around it. So, like, I found The Game got richer and richer with every viewing.
I couldn't do it. I don't know why.
But The Hateful Eight.
Yeah. So this movie has that sort of quality for me of that, like, the first viewing, man, I fell in love with it. Like, I really, really, really dug it. And I will watch it again to see if my hunch is correct.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if it'll hold up. Like you said, sort of Kill Bill for me. I could watch Kill Bill, whatever. I could watch Pulp Fiction, whatever. I could watch Reservoir Dogs, whatever. I can watch. I think Inglourious Bastards. Honestly, I could watch whenever. And the other Django. I watch when I'm in the mood, and this one I just don't.
Yeah,
it was I don't know what's going to outweigh itself. The sort of mystery that I was super like invested in what was going on. If me knowing it will if the cool of the movie, and this is a very cool movie, is enough to keep me interested upon a second viewing. What'd you think?
Well, going off what you say, I agree with you, but for a couple of different reasons. One is I enjoyed my time while I was watching the movie, but it is a long movie, and the setup.
There's an intermission.
Yeah, there's an intermission, but not just that. It feels like the first right up until we get to the intermission, or even maybe like 20 minutes before the intermission, which is an hour and a half into the movie. it's still set up, like we're still setting up who's who and how they're going to come together and what they want.
But he loves doing that shit.
He does, but this is the longest he's taken to get there. And then the film does a thing, which is that it undermines that who's who by introducing Quentin Tarantino himself as a narrator, like starting to explain things to you that we haven't seen yet. And I felt like my thing is, I don't know if I can sit through this film again to have that mystery undercut, because having any of that mystery be undercut takes away any pleasure from, from watching the film again. Whereas I kind of feel like Inglourious Bastards, the way which was it Aldo Raines, Brad Pitt's character, is going to set up this plan and how it gets executed and fails, and watching there's a certain pleasure to watching that over and over again. I'm not sure there is more pleasure to be derived watching Samuel L. Jackson and Kurt Russell come to this, meet each other, introduce themselves to Jennifer Jason Leigh's Donahue character, and then come to Minnie's haberdashery and, put the horses in the stable, build the line to the outhouse,
sure,
come back in and hammer the net. There is so much process involved that I think, and then for me, the kind of undercutting of the setup in the second half doesn't feel like I'm going to, like the thought of watching it again kind of like makes me feel a little exhausted. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it while it was happening.
Yeah, I think everyone, I do. I think everyone should see this movie, preferably in a theater.
Yeah.
Because it does feel very play-like in its like, it has a overture in the beginning and an intermission and chapters and all that shit.
Yeah. So it's a weird thing to say is that I enjoyed the film, but then the third thing that I want to get into when we get into spoilers is that Quentin Tarantino has been in the public recently with taking a political stand with Black Lives Matter. He's basically he's marched with protesters in New York. The police, and then an interesting thing happened, which is the NYPD's police union came out and said that they would boycott his film because of his support for Black Lives Matter. And there's an interesting political statement that I feel like this film is tiptoeing around that doesn't quite land for me and is undercut by another factor in the movie entirely. And I want to get into that really specifically when we get into spoilers.
Why don't we get into spoilers then?
I think we should get into spoilers. So our final word before we get into spoilers is it is certainly, for me, it's an experience to see in a theater. Certainly if you can see it in 70 millimeter, not at the Village East Cinema in New York, but in somewhere that is going to project it well. I think it's an experience. I am not convinced it's a great movie, but Tarantino, I think they even said this. He even said this himself about Death Proof. A bad Tarantino movie is still a great movie. So it's worth seeing from that respect,
I would take it one step further. A bad Kurt Russell movie is still a great movie.
Well, not all of us can be Escape from New York fans, but
no, you can and you will.
I haven't seen it yet, but I want to also finish that statement by saying that this is not a bad movie in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's a great movie, I think. But it's great in a different way.
Yeah, did you have any final thoughts before we get into spoilers?
Nope, let's go.
Let's go to spoilers. All right, for those of you listening at home, we are getting into spoilers now. So, what happens in these? So, specifically, Kurt Russell is a bounty hunter, and he has one
John the Hangman Ruth.
John the Hangman Roos, and he has in his possession
Daisy Domergue.
Daisy Domergue, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, who we will see again in another film we're going to talk about later, Anomalisa.
There you go.
There you go. Who has a $10,000 bounty on her head.
Which back in the day is quite a bit.
Well, it seems like a lot now. I could make a movie for $10,000, not on film, but maybe on an iPhone.
On an iPhone, you can make an iPhone movie.
Yeah, exactly. And they arrive at Minnie's Haberdashery, where they're confronted by many a nefarious character, including Oswald Mowbray, played by Tim Roth, giving his best English accent, Bob, the Mexican stable hand, who's somehow mysteriously taken over Minnie's Haberdashery because Minnie is out of town, Joe Gage, played by Michael Madsen, and General Sandy Smithers, played by Bruce Dern. And Kurt Russell thinks that people in the room might be in cahoots with Daisy to try and free her before she can be taken to Red Rock
right.
behind.
Well, so a couple things here. So first of all, he's called the Hangman because back then he's a bounty hunter, and back then it was the whole dead or alive nonsense, and he was known for bringing them in alive, even if it said dead or alive.
Yeah.
So that's his whole claim to fame. That's his drive. He just brings fugitives in to hang. They stop along with Samuel L. Jackson. They pick up in the snow, and the dude who plays the sheriff of the town they're heading to.
Yeah. Walter Goggins.
Yeah, they stop at Minnie's Haberdashery, which is basically a way station in the wilderness, where you can buy resupply or stay the night or blah, 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 blah. But a huge blizzard is coming in, so they're all stuck there together. And Kurt Russell makes it very clear in the beginning. He's like, listen, this is my prisoner. I'm taking her to hang. And if anyone tries to get in the way of that, we're going to have a huge fucking problem. He basically walks in and owns the room. Now, this is a man who's been sort of around. He knows people will be trying to screw him at every turn. So, you first start thinking he's paranoid, but, it turns out, he's not paranoid. It's entirely true.
Oddly, if he had slightly less ego, he might realize that the smartest thing to do is not to walk into a room and announce that you have Daisy Domergue in your position.
Right.
Maybe it'd be better to just kind of go a little low key.
But I don't think that affected it considering what happens.
Well, everyone was in on it. Well, spoiler alert, everyone was in on it anyway. And it turns out that his suspicions about people being there to try and rescue Daisy Domergue turns out to be true.
What?
But it's really the thing is though, although Kurt Russell is kind of first and foremost in terms of the narrative, this is really Samuel L. Jackson's film, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and so what's Samuel L. Jackson's angle on this whole deal?
He was I'm trying to remember exactly how he came about everybody, but he plays Major Marcus Warren.
Yeah,
and Kurt Russell picks him up in the blizzard on the way. They sort of kind of know each other, or at least have heard of each other. I think they had dinner once.
They
like
had a
4
steak
years
dinner
ago.
many years ago. Yeah,
and they ended up, because Kurt Russell doesn't trust him, but he also knows him, and like he is known. I'm trying to remember what he's known for. What Sam Jackson's known for.
Well, obviously, Sam Jackson being an African-American in frontier Wyoming is going to draw attention to himself, particularly being a free man. And what I like,
letter. That's right.
Yeah. And what I like is that the film doesn't stray away from racial politics. Like people still call Sam L. Jackson, even though Major Marcus Warren, the N-word, and they're pretty derogatory to him, but like just on sight. And Kurt Russell's character seems to have a modicum of respect for him, even though he's achieved a lot in his life. Major Warren was a kind of a key figure in the Civil War. But that's not to say that and this is why I think the film is trying to make a political statement about American politics, and it may have been no coincidence that Quentin Tarantino came out with the Black Lives Matter protest at the same time, and about racial inequality in America, despite Major Warren being a key figure. He is seen as a villain in these parts because he's a black man.
Yeah, and I think what sets him apart, at least in John Ruth and Kurt Russell's eyes, is the fact that he carries with him a letter from President Lincoln.
Yeah.
And like Kurt Russell wants to read it, and he just, whatever. They obviously were on the same side, but he holds like a great reverence for the president, and therefore, if the president says this guy's, the real deal and good shit, then absolutely he is. But yeah, so they all end up at Minnie's haberdashery, along with all these other characters checked in. Kurt Russell announces that this is his bounty and y'all better back up. And then shit starts hitting the fan, really.
Yeah, and it happens right around the intermission mark. I think Samuel L. Jackson delivers one of those
another speech,
a fantastic Quentin Tarantino monologue about he meets Bruce Dern's general, who he immediately recognizes as someone who they fought on opposite sides of the battlefield many years ago, and they both committed major atrocities in the name of their side. But it turns out that Samuel L. Jackson or Major Warren has a secret about General Sandy Smithers' son that he's going to spill at that moment, which is to say he was a bounty hunter who killed his son in possibly the most degrading way a racist white man can ever be killed.
Yes. So that's sort of like, and that's even like almost like a side plot.
Yeah. Because ultimately that death, which maybe takes like 20, 30 minutes out of this movie, has no bearing on the rest of the events about to unfold.
Right.
Very little. But it's cool.
Yeah, and then once we get further along, I have an actual question for you because there's a part of this movie that confused the fuck out of me, but we'll get to it.
Okay.
So then, is it after the intermission that we come back on the group after Samuel L. Jackson basically kills Smithers after Smithers draws the gun on him and Samuel L. Jackson's just a quicker draw?
Yeah.
But that's basically... So there's two things that happen at this point, and I wasn't sure, and maybe it's cleared up later, maybe it's not. I didn't know if the story he was telling was true or not. Yeah. About his son and about the stuff. I just didn't know if the whole goal was for the old man to pull the gun first, so then Samuel L. Jackson would be in the right when he killed him.
I think it's a valid question. I think either way,
it doesn't really matter. I was just curious.
Yeah. No, and I think either way is a rich storytelling moment, because if you believe that the story is made up, then that makes Samuel L. Jackson's character far more either manipulative or devious. Or if the story is true, he's equally manipulative or devious because he enacted this amazing revenge on a character that had wronged him in life. So I think what's cool about the film as well, outside of its Quentin Tarantino's cool factor, is Tarantino does a really good job of explaining to you how much storytelling is important in the Old West. Like what happens, we talked about the Lincoln letter, and I think Walter Goggins' character, the new sheriff of Red Rock, points out immediately that this is not true. And Samuel L. Jackson kind of, makes the statement, well, it's not true, but it got me on that stagecoach with you. And it like, to me, it's something that Tarantino did well in Inglourious Bastards as well. One of my pet peeves in all movies set in foreign countries is I have this, I just
English accents.
Oh my God. I like, it's like nails on chalkboard to me to like hear a movie set in 1942 Germany with German soldiers talking to each other in English.
What's that Egypt movie that's getting a lot of flack for that?
Oh, I think it's Gods of Egypt.
Yeah. It's the all white British cast of Gods of Egypt.
And, this has been done for, almost as long as film has been going on. But I loved in Inglourious Bastards that Tarantino really makes a point that if you can speak a language, it matters. And if you can't speak a language, it matters. And what I love in this movie is your ability to weave a tale is just as important as your ability to draw a gun, because you like Samuel L. Jackson's ability to weave the tale is what gets him to kill General Smithers. And it's really cool. The second thing I wanted to say, just quickly, and as we should have mentioned it earlier, was Tarantino does an amazing job of making you feel the cold. I felt.
And I think that might be the 70 mil too. You feel enveloped by this blizzard the entire time.
Maybe that's a good reason for it, because I really felt the cold. I really felt how, like when they were eating a bowl of stew, I was like, oh man, that seems so good to me right now.
And I feel like he talked about that when he was talking about it. He said he wanted to do that, and that was it. I totally got it before he had said it. And like, it's funny. I want to see The Revenant. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I want to see if that has the same effect or how they do it differently.
Yeah, I think they'll have different focuses, but yeah, he's Tarantino does such a good job with the cold. But the thing that falls, so to me, the thing that starts to fall apart in the movie is twofold. One is the ending, which kind of gets into this slightly Reservoir Dogsy kind of
slightly.
Yeah, all bad guys out for themselves against each other. And again, it has a sort of familiar air to it, but that's not to say it's not done well or derivative in any way.
Why, there might be another giant film out right now that's similar to its originals type of pedigree.
Perhaps sit in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's quite good.
Yeah.
It's quite good.
So there's that. But then, the title card for the last chapter. Do you remember what the title card was?
No.
It was Black Man, White Hell. And I was kind of, with that title card, I was like, oh, I kind of sat up in my seat when that title card came up, and I was like, okay, I think Tarantino's about to like bring the ruckus. And with hearing about him being at Black Lives Matter, with, even today, we're hearing that police aren't going to be indicted in the shooting of Tamir Rice, which just is enraging. 12-year-old kid was shot dead by the police. And how that plays into racial politics in America. I was kind of thinking, oh, this is where Tarantino is going to bring all that skill he has, all that talent he has, to make a statement about Major Warren and the way he is treated, despite his, clearly he is an equal in this film, but very few people see him that way. And I was waiting for him to either make some statement or for the film to make some statement about that. And it doesn't happen, which led me to kind of feel a little bit empty. Now, I don't know if that's just me loading expectation onto the film, which shouldn't be there.
Maybe a little, but also...
But that title...
Yeah, of course. I mean, he does have the hardest time, I think, in the movie. He also converts sort of a weird way his least favorite person, the sheriff, who basically hates him.
Yeah.
Who is like the son of some, I forget the whole backstory of what it was, but like they kind of become buddies of circumstance, and then they start to trust each other.
Yeah.
So he kind of gets over his racial hatred based on kind of just him getting over being stupid.
Yeah. But the film doesn't really make a. I mean, I don't know whether it's so subtle that it's
subtle. You're absolutely right. It's not. I mean, race isn't what the film is about. It's just sort of a catalyst to get to the point of the film.
But that title is such a roadmap to reading it that way.
Yeah, I know, but I also think it's Tarantino, and he's going to use shocking language in his title. I mean, it's what he does. He could have the most benign thing like a trip to the supermarket, and then it's going to be tsunami death toll, and you're like, Jesus Christ. Like, I think it's just his way of like upping the stakes.
Right. And I mean, I'm a big I'm a big fan of Public Enemy, for example, and they used that. I don't think they used the exact words. I remember they had a black man's heaven is a white man's hell, or white man's heaven is a black man's hell, I think was the title of a Public Enemy track. So I came to that scene with that title thinking about that. And I don't think the film really delivers on that. And I was a little bit let down by that, because not just because the film lacks any sort of narrative catharsis, in the way that Reservoir Dogs has narrative catharsis and all these characters eventually killing each other. There's not a lot of narrative catharsis in the way that the Hateful Eight ends, which is to say, spoiler alert, all the characters kill each other.
What?
But there's another thing. So I don't know. Did you feel catharsis? When the film came to an end, how did the ending sit with you?
The ending sat fine. I figured, it's told what sort of happened and why it happened and who did certain things, and that was enough for me. I knew going in that no one of these characters is going to get out alive. There's no way. I felt fine with it. It wasn't an ending that blew me away. I really liked every little thing they set up. Candy on the floor was sort of a little clue to another thing going on based on when they time warped back to how the people there to break Daisy out or take her back before she was to hang. I liked how all those things, it didn't pull a Lost. Every little thing it told you or hinted at, it paid off in the end, and I always appreciate that.
Yeah, he's he knows how to finish to start and finish a movie, unlike say some franchise filmmakers we know right now making movies for Disney.
I have a whole thing about that I can't get into because I'm currently at my parents' house and I can't yell. But we'll get into that at another time.
Yeah.
I did. I liked the end. I thought it was a suiting end. I like how the letter turns out to be fake. Mm-hmm. And that sort of is the letter from Lincoln turns out to be fake, and it's the perfect sort of button on none of these characters are good people.
Yeah.
No one there. I think the only good people died, the people that worked at Minnie's Haberdashery that died in the flashback when fucking Channing Tatum and the boys, who Channing Tatum plays, Daisy Domegue's brother.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, not on the IMDb page for some reason.
No, I think it's a nice surprise because if you knew, it's that thing, which is that if you knew he was there, he's such a big enough actor. Yeah, you kind of
I love Channing Tatum, such a fucking just cool dude, and I never thought he was the way he sort of came about. Anyway, he was a good addition.
Yeah. And, I think maybe the letter is kind of hinting at the racial dynamics that the racial politics that I'm kind of thinking of, because it's this fake letter about how Lincoln's proud of everything that Warren has done. Mm-hmm. And it seems like such a loss. But, I don't think the film really sticks that landing to make the letter when they, at the end of the film, they read the letter out loud. And it was a nice narrative device, but it didn't resonate with me very strongly. I don't know if you felt differently about it.
I just thought it was a nice button. I don't think it was the point or a particular strong resonating factor. I was just I like when things come together, and that was sort of for me again one of the last little notes.
Yeah.
To sort of be called back to.
But here's the thing that I found problematic throughout the whole film, and I'm going to harken back to a conversation I had with a friend of mine when I was in film school in my pretentious days. But I'm a big fan.
Yes, back in your pretentious days.
I'm a huge fan of Spike Lee's movie Do the Right Thing. I adore that film to no end, and I think it's an amazing film. But I was in film school, and I saw it in New Zealand, away from living in America. Living of that racial dynamic. And so I thought it was an amazing testament to the power of filmmaking in terms of having a conversation about racial dynamics. But I was with he wasn't a film student, actually. He was just a guy living in my dormitory who was talking about that movie. And he said, but here's the thing. If this is a film that wants to alleviate some of the racial tension or at least create a dialogue about racial tension, one of the things it does is poorly address the other races in the film, including the Korean store owner in that movie. I don't know if you remember it or not, but a Korean store owner is kind of treated as a cliche of a Korean store owner. And when that person said that to me, I kind of I had to take a step back and think about my approach to Do the Right Thing. And I was like, oh yeah, that is interesting that the film goes to such pains to paint African Americans and whites with full, rich, detailed textures, but then treats another race as a caricature, and it signals somewhat of a mismatch. And the thing that was problematic to me in The Hateful Eight was the way in which Daisy Domergue gets treated by every other character in this film. Now, there is a casualness to the violence upon which Daisy is visited in this film from almost every character, to the point where it becomes treated as a joke.
Yeah.
And I think your reading of the film, if you if you can see that as a joke, and if you think that she deserves everything she's getting as the characters believe, then the ending, the way in which she's dispatched at the end of the film is probably quite satisfying, which the characters themselves call it satisfying. But I found the way they treated her to be pretty deplorable, and the fact that the film didn't address it in the way that it tried to address Major Marcus Warren's backstory, problematic for me.
Yes and no. I mean, again, it's two dudes talking about, a sexist sort of thing. But like, there's two outlooks of this. She basically gets beat to shit in this movie by most people in this movie. Turns out she's a fucking psychopathic gang leader who's murdered a ton of people, and she deserves every punch and hit she gets.
Well, hold on there a second, because everybody in this film has killed a bunch of people in horrific ways.
Not everybody.
Every single character in this movie is guilty of, like, in some cases, of almost not genocide, but in mass murder.
Well, yes, and they all sort of get their comeuppance at the end. The thing about but for instance, Kurt Russell, I think, is the only one who doesn't kill people. He just brings them to die. That's his whole gimmick.
But he viciously beats her on a whim, and when he turns up with her, he's beaten her mercilessly already. And it's not, it's look, I don't want to be like, I'm not suggesting that that the film should be revisionist, although Tarantino has done that before as well with Inglourious Bastards, where he kind of wrote a revisionist history of World War II. I'm just saying it's interesting to me that the film treats the violence upon which Daisy is afflicted by with such casualness that it almost invalidates the any kind of messaging or any kind of sympathy we might feel for particularly Major Marcus Warren's character.
I just don't think there's I see you're looking at the movie from sort of an outside perspective, like Tarantino's actual personal life and the causes that he champions. I don't think this film is really meant to be about anything like that. Again, I think he's using these things like race and things like that as sort of basically like paints in his palette to sort of tell his story. I think the violence I honestly do think that the violence inherited on Daisy and sort of the lack of dignity treated by her, whether she deserves it or not, is meant to kind of show you that all of these men are deplorable in their own way. I think that's kind of why, and the fact that they turn it into almost like Looney Tunes violence when dealing with her. You could look at that one way or the other. It could be so cavalier that that's troubling. But at the same time, it could totally be the fact that it is such cartoon violence. You're actually sort of sparing her in a weird way from the real brutal shit until like the very end that everyone gets. Like it's
I don't know. I don't know, man. Just one thing is the way that which she's hanged and the pleasure in which the two characters derive from hanging her.
Well, that's
that
the
way.
very end. That's the very end. I thought we were talking about like the violence throughout, like before that. Like I'm talking about like when she gets hit and like in the face or whatever, and then like she like or like when she pretends to like hang herself when they're talking, or like she always bounces up until that very end. She always bounces back very Wile E. Coyote style.
Yeah,
like she just comes back with a smile or like whatever and says something sharper than any hit that she took.
Yeah.
And every character in this fucking movie dies a brutal death. And she's the one, I would say, in this film that is the most murderous. And she dies horribly.
Now, wait, when you say she's the most murderous, are we talking about before the movie began? Or
yes,
in the movie?
yes. But everyone's the most murderous before the movie began. I'm saying, but like I think there was talks of like her going into towns and just killing and destroying like men, women, and children based on shit. Samuel L. Jackson did a horrible thing when he killed 47. He lit a group of Confederates on fire. Yeah,
and Bruce Dern's character didn't take African American prisoners when they should have, and instead killed them all.
Everyone does awful shit.
But so. Yeah, which is fine, but I find the way, the casualness of the violence and the Looney Tunes, way that the violence is is enacted upon her to be slightly troubling in the fact that the movie doesn't address it at all. It's kind of a joke.
Fair enough.
And then the end of the film where Chris Mannix, the sheriff, and Major Marcus Warren hang her is supposed to have some kind, they even talk about it being satisfying because she turns out to be the big bad in the film.
Right.
And I don't, my problem is I don't think she's the big bad. And I think that some of the things that are happening to her are more awful than some of the things that are happening to the rest of the room.
All right, fair enough. I think she is the big bad, and I'm kind of fine with it. I don't know if that makes me an awful person, but just the way the movie's set up. That's fair. Okay, so other than that little agreeing to disagree sort of moment there, Shahir, what just end final thoughts. What do you think about this movie? We've been going for about an hour.
Yeah, I am a Tarantino fan, so I will always line up to see a Tarantino movie. I think this is one, Death Proof aside, I think Death Proof is an example of a bad Tarantino movie that is genuinely bad. This might be one of the first where I am kind of disliking the movie, but I still, as I said before, a bad Tarantino movie is still far more interesting than most people's movies. So I would say it's worth seeing. There's something about this movie that leaves a bad taste in my mouth that I'm going to have to think about for a little bit longer.
That's fair, and I agree with all that, and I think you should go see it and see which of the many bad tastes it leaves in your mouth, but that's not to say that it's not an enjoyable watch and you shouldn't watch it just once, because I had a great time in the theater, and I really enjoyed myself. I think it was a fun time at the movies, if you can handle a little bit of blood and humor mixed in with one another, and a lot of bit of blood, I should say. But yeah, it's a Tarantino movie through and through, and if you like his style, you're going to love this thing, so go see it. Shahir, where can people find you when you're not disappointed in 70mm projection?
You can find me at shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD, where you can find my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, all that good stuff. Remember to email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. If you agree or disagree with our takes, how do you feel about the treatment of Daisy Domergue's character? How do you feel about the racial politics in A Hateful Eight? How do you feel about Star Wars? We've been getting emails,
and we're going to do a year in review episode a couple episodes down the line where we're going to talk about all of these emails basically that people have been sending some really fun opinions. So I can't wait for that.
Just a quick shout out. Thank you to Ivan Kander, Sam Kelly, and Stephen Press for sending us emails about
we will get to them, we promise.
About our Star Wars episodes. I appreciate it, particularly because you guys say I'm right. Moving on, Matt Kroll, where can we find more of your work?
You can find it at MatthewKroll.com or Skeletor, the number 4 PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. This has been the only podcast about the Hateful Eight, which I find incredibly difficult because Tarantino's a well-known filmmaker and Kurt Russell's a beautiful human being, and Samuel L. Jackson is the coolest motherfucker on the planet. So you'd think there'd be more. I looked on iTunes; it's not there. We should write our Congress people about that. But anyway, until next time, guys. I think what do we do? We're doing what's it called next? Anomalisa next. Anomalisa. Just never mind. This has been our little show, and go to the damn movies, people. Get some hate in you. Some haterade. Hate. Laters.